Alrighty, good morning, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. Sorry about the little late on the showtime. I noticed just as we were speaking here offline a little bit that it was already showtime. So apologize about that, but we are here nonetheless. We were actually supposed to do this on Monday, but I had some surgery to take care of, and turns out I went to the doctor on the wrong day, mixed up my appointments, and got that fixed, and we're here today. So I've been looking forward to this since we had on Mr. Worth Parker and Aaron B from MARSOC. I've started speaking to some more of our GWAT era veterans from the Marine Corps ever since those two interviews. So I'm very happy with what we're gonna get to talk about today. And actually, Ryan Madden, our guest today, has told me a good idea for a show that he thought would be interesting, of me just telling who exactly I am and what I'm doing, and found my way into doing this. But this is Mr. Ryan's show, and as I mentioned, he is a United States Marine Corps vet, an NCO, and as you could tell by the title, a lot of experiences, 5 combat deployments. I believe maybe 2 to Iraq or 3 to Iraq and 2 to Afghanistan. I could be flubbing.
Two to Iraq, 3 to Afghanistan, but pretty close. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. So as you can tell, guys, in Iraq, he was in 2 very, very deadly places, Marja and Ramadi. So we're going to hear a lot of information today and learn a little bit about Marine Corps pre 9/11, and then the complete ramp up and total change of what was going on post 9/11, and even while serving in the Marine Corps, seeing changes occur. So hope you're having a good morning this morning, or I should say now this afternoon, Mr. Ryan. We're going to jump right into it here, and we'd like to get a little backstory on our guest, and so we'll go right at the very start. When and where were you born?
I was born in Portland, Oregon in 1983, April. Birthday's coming up.
All right, Pacific Northwest man then. Beautiful country. I have been invited to visit by a few SOG vets that live up there, and I very, very much would like to go up there. Do you live in Oregon now, or
I do.
You
I'm
do?
still in the Portland metro area. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. That is fantastic. And guys, I'll be linking an interview that Ryan did with Vet with a Science, Vet with a Sign, his podcast, and it is a great hour 55, maybe right at 2 hour podcast where they're reminiscing because they actually served together, which was very cool to hear. But growing up, were you being in the Portland? Were you an outdoorsy guy? Were you more of a books reading guy? What was a young Ryan up to in Portland?
So in the 90s, it was pretty suburban, right? Like I worked at Hollywood Video when I was a kid, played some PlayStation 1, marginal, poor high school athlete, poor student, not a ton of direction. I was definitely kind of inspired by my grandfather. He was in the Coast Guard during World War II, and he was from Seattle before he moved down to Portland in the 50s. And his idea during World War II was if he joined the Coast Guard, he would be on the coast. He's from Seattle. Seemed like a good idea. He was not. He's in the South Pacific. On the Coast Guard had some combat cargo ships specifically designed to move. So he was moving like combat logistics support guys for the Marines, and he was at the Battle of Okinawa. And he was always very impressed by the Marines, by their performance during World War II, which gave me that idea. So kind of, just off I went. I remember I think they still do this. Like when you go to the Marine Corps recruiting office, they have these little tabs where they're like, do you value like financial stability? Do you value like education? And there's one that says like travel and adventure. And obviously if you're 17 going on 18 in, the year 2000, you're going to choose travel and adventure. And they were not kidding. They were not kidding about the adventure and the travel. That was way understatement of the century.
That's that ain't that the truth, and
Yeah.
that's ask about your grandpa, and then I had a question going back a little bit. Grandpa gonna join the Coast Guard, serve, and a lot of stuff going on the coast during WW2. Subs right off the coast. California dealing with all the stuff going on. Them coming up the Mississippi River. I mean, there's all kinds of the Germans, I should say, down south. So I mean, a lot of stuff was going on that people probably didn't think or know was going on. And there he thinks, I'll be here guarding the homeland, and ends up in the South Pacific.
South Pacific,
yeah.
right.
The
South Pacific,
arguably, other than the Eastern Front, arguably the toughest, deadliest AO in the WW2.
He actually went to, like, when the war ended, I'm trying to remember, he actually wrote a memoir. I need to actually reread it, but I think he went back to San Francisco and thought he was getting out, and they're like, no, you actually need to go to China. So I'm not sure if he went back to San Francisco or where it was, but he went to China like right after the war. So yeah, he was there for a bit. Yeah. So
that is interesting.
Yeah, right.
That's like and I'm trying to get his son on. We've been speaking, Sledgehammer, Eugene Sledge.
Great, great author.
He went back to China as a China Marine right after the war, thinking he was going to get to come home and be done. Yeah. So wow.
He was on Okinawa as well with 3-5.
Yeah, your grandpa could have at least crossed paths with him,
Possible, right.
That is wild. I'm a big music fan, I'm sure, as you can tell by posters and all that on the wall. That Portland 80s, 90s, huge music scene burgeoning. Seems like it's always been big, but of course with grunge in the late 80s and 90s, it seemed to blow up, and especially in Seattle and such. Were you big into music, listening, playing? Did you play any music?
I listened quite a bit. I think during that time it was like kind of a Beastie Boys, Foo Fighter, Nirvana.
Soundgarden.
Soundgarden. Yeah, I have like my 90s, punk playlist, like on my phone. Right, of course.
Excellent. Always love that. I think that gets overtaken. And speaking to the vets, everybody wants to hear the blood and guts and all of that, but
you missed a real opportunity with Worth Parker. You should have dug into his musical taste.
Oh, we did a little bit, and we're gonna have
a little bit of that.
Yeah,
you should, yeah.
He's an Athens boy, so he's a big Panic fan and knows the Dead actually saw Jerry, and I'll just show you how big of a fan I am. That's awesome. Ruined my skin with a Steely, but we're gonna have him back on, and we're gonna actually we're talking about covering a little bit of his musical taste growing up and in the Marine Corps, because I'm always interested in what you guys were listening to and all of that, which that'll come up later on again. I think people miss a real opportunity to hear what you guys were listening to and what all was going on. That's a huge part of history right there. So high school, well, first off, you've clearly been influenced by your grandpa militarily. You get through grade school, junior high school. In high school, are you thinking about the military already, or are you thinking about going to college a bit and maybe doing an OCS thing, or what?
No. That was definitely not happening. It was pretty much the military, particularly the Marine Corps. There was not a lot of potential at the time. So, the Marine Corps is good at cultivating people. If you don't have a lot of natural, like, somebody's going to cultivate you along the way, or you're going to figure it out. Have not figured it out. So the Marine Corps enlisting is a great way to do that if you don't have any potential to do anything else. So.
And if you've not spoken, usually it's good enough just speaking to a Marine that was in combat, WW2, Korea, or Vietnam to get you hooked, or even just seeing the Marine in dress blues, or when the recruiting commercials were at their best would be enough to hook you. The Marines have always had a hell of a recruiting system, PR system. It's just outstanding. To me, you cannot beat, other than the Green Beret and their Class A's with the whole Magilla. A Marine in dress blues can't beat it, or an officer in black. Forget about it. So Marines all the way. No other thought of any other branch. And do you immediately go looking for a recruiter right after high school, or?
Yeah, I joined like in November of 2000, like when I was still a senior, and then like just shipped as soon as I could.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you joined still in high school then. Excellent.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay. So you being a West Coast boy, you've joined now. MEPS, is that in Portland where you
Yep, we
go
did
and get?
MEPS in Portland, right?
Okay. Any trouble going through MEPS? I hear in the
No,
big cities it's
no.
pretty crazy with 100 of you guys in a line and all of that. And
It was quite a while ago. I don't really recall. I think I didn't have to go to school that day or whatever. My recruiter took me down there, so like it was just going. Waiting in line was not the first. That was the first, maybe, but definitely not the last. When
no,
you're
oh God,
in
no.
the
That
military,
was the
right?
beginning
Right.
of learning of standing in line, is what my
Standing in
buddies
line,
would tell
right?
me. Yeah.
Right. The first
Um,
4 years, you spend a lot of time standing in line,
yeah.
so
Uh,
waiting for word, yeah.
yeah.
So after that, so I went to boot camp in July of 2001, and I actually had a really good experience.
San
A couple
Diego?
weeks,
Are you a
yeah, San
West
Diego,
Coast Marine?
yeah,
Okay.
went to San Diego. A couple weeks ago, I'm in touch with one of my drill instructors, Adam Sandercock. So I picked him up from the airport because he's from Oregon. He was doing some family business down in Salem. So we went and hung out for a bit. And I'd seen him a couple times since. If there's a documentary called Ears Open, Eyeballs Click, it's about Charlie Company in like the early 2000s. I think that this was filmed in like 2003, but Adam was one of my drill instructors. And it was nice to be able to hang out with him for a little bit. And we were talking like he was like, I'm gonna make sure you guys are tough. You could take a punch and you could PT. Like he was very tough and creative. And that era of drill instructors. Then he went on to after the drill field. He was in 3-5 in Fallujah, and then he did another 3-5 deployment, which was pretty tough. So we were kind of talking about that, but it was well trained. Where the purpose of recruit training, and a lot of people talk about why don't we model it like the commando course that the British do? Like they're completely different services, right? We just happen to be called Marines, but they can make you really physically tough. And basically able to handle stress. Like that's the whole point is just push enough stress on you, basically inoculate you so you can
mentally, yeah.
so you could drive if you're a motor transport guy, you could drive under nods on a winding road in the middle of the night, but like you're gonna have to do these things, like when you're tired, when you have to focus.
Hungry, yeah.
Right. That's that whole discipline. It's not really the drill portion of it. And Adam was kind of talking about that. He's like, you have to be physically and mentally tough. And they made sure of that, especially during that time period. So it was great to get to spend some time with them.
I'm hoping one day I would love to get to speak to a Marine Corps drill instructor. I would love
I
to do
know.
that.
I'm sure we can make that happen. I know plenty of them at this point.
That would be awesome. That would be
So
awesome.
9/11 occurred like while I was in boot camp, so it doesn't really affect like the whole thing. Like you're just gonna continue, because
were you when you got into boot camp? I'm sure you being a young man in the '80s, you've seen the movies. You're watching all the movies before you've gotten in.
right,
You've seen Gunny Hartman tearing Cowboy and Joker a
right,
new butthole. You
right.
know what's coming.
Yeah. I mean, the reality, and it's kind of like years and years later, you think about how simplistic that was, but it's really effective for children, essentially. It's a summer camp is what it is. Like it's a controlled environment. The drill instructors control everything. They know it's happening all the time. It's safe. It's very safe.
Controlled madness.
Right. It's very safe compared to other training you do, which is much more high risk. It's the safest training the Marine Corps has, It's just a good place to like kick stress. Like, it's very disorienting. Like they have that system down, which creates that kind of like, resilience. So yeah, 9/11, I remember we were on the rifle range, but it was really just kind of the training schedule is going on. Like from day one to the day you graduate, that training schedule isn't changing, like barring an act of God, because it all has to get done, right?
Okay.
So after that graduation, you get infantry training, and I was actually writing some notes about that. Like they've tried to kind of modernize that. There's like an infantry marine course now, which is more like advanced and trying to get skills better. Because at that point in time, like the early 2000s, infantry training battalion, where all the O3s went, you know, you learn the weapon systems you're going to typically be using, and they go through these packages of communicate. We were still doing like, you know, the field phones. That was still part of the equipment set, which we never used in the fleet. But like it was kind of antiquated. You have to kind of check the box and get through it. Like the quality, you know, you offensive, defensive skills or not. You know, you know fire and movement. You understand kind of fire and maneuver of how that works somewhat. Defense is basically digging a fighting hole and kind of knowing sectors of fire. You know, it's very, and then the message is, don't worry, when you get to the fleet, you're going to learn that. Don't worry, when you get to the fleet, you know, you're going to learn how to do this and learn how to do that. So, you know, it's just, you don't, like, depending on what you get out of it, you do some lane navigation. I'm trying to, you know, I'm just thinking of like how the, you know, the program of instruction during that period of time, because I was an instructor later, and I kind of think back to that, and they've tried to improve that. But even now, like doing that infantry marine course, it's like it's labor intensive. I was talking to a guy who I knew from a previous unit that was an instructor there, and he's like, yeah, it's just really hard to do it. You know what I mean? Like doing these, instead of doing the old cookie cutter, you know, make the sausage formula to the whole thing, like where it's like, you know, it's going to be lead and like it's more advanced. He said that the quality is way better, but it's just, it's really hard for the instructors to do it. So
yeah,
ITB, you don't learn a ton. I was very good at using a saw, like the M249 squad automatic weapon after that, but that was, and I could use a compass and read a map.
So. And what does ITB stand for?
Infantry Training Battalion.
Okay.
So that's part of like the School of Infantry, and that contrasts with Marine Combat Training, which is where all non-infantry Marines go.
Excellent, excellent. And I was Nick Roberts messaged me, and we've been talking. I'm hoping maybe he'll feel comfortable coming on and talking.
Yeah, he told me that. Yeah, that would be a great interview. He's a good friend. He's my roommate.
That's what he was saying, that y'all ended up rooming together fairly soon into y'all's career. Yeah.
We had a great time together.
What is after you get through the School of Infantry and ITB and such as that, what is the next step in the pipeline for you? Are you signed to a unit or
Right. So we went right over the hill. Nick Roberts was with me. We went on buses and went right to 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines at San Mateo, right over the hill from San Onofre. And some guys went down the road to Camp Horno at 1st Marines. So Pendleton has 1st Marines and 5th Marines at this point in time, and still to this day. So.
Wow. And what was that like for a fresh dude checking in to a new unit? Was it no wars, I guess, had taken place fair at that point in time for a while, unless maybe Grenada or something like that. Were there any old heads still around, or was it?
I can kind of give you kind of like how, and I've thought about this at length, and now I have a public forum to talk about this. So we had not been touched by combat since like the Gulf. Mostly Somalia to an extent, but that was pretty much like 1-9 when they were still around. West Coast 3-1, but the Gulf, like I have a good friend Joe Salaji. He was with 1-1 sniper platoon stay during the Gulf, and he saw some pretty significant combat. It was short, but it was very violent at these hot points when they were going through the breach, and like, you know, like even I'm not super Gulf War familiar. The 3rd Recon and Saudi Arabia when they got cut off and that kind of thing. Some of those are more famous, but there was definitely some pretty intense fighting. But we weren't like, you know, we didn't have a lot. There's a big gap between 2002, 2001, and the Gulf, which was a small group of people, in Vietnam, which was a very long time ago, and very different. So when I showed up, they just got back from Okinawa, and there's a few people I think of off the top of my head. My team leader, Ryan Nieto. Roger Thompson, who's a retired Marine captain now, he was a squad leader. Matt Ahern, he was a squad leader at that point in time, sergeant. And these guys were very, Eric Robles, very good squad leaders, team leaders. and they did their part. It was a lot of like kind of thrashing and that kind of thing. But we also went out and called the backyard, like Tomato Patch area of San Mateo, where you go out and do patrolling. But this was we were on the path. Like Joe Dunford was the commander for 5th Marines at the time. We knew that OIF was, Iraqi freedom was going to occur. We were on that training pipeline at that point in time, and that pretty much started immediately. We knew that was going to. Well, we didn't know, they knew that was coming. And they started mobilizing and doing leaders recon to Kuwait. They knew where they were setting up the camps to start staging and doing logistics and everything out there. So we started doing a workup basically for the invasion of Iraq, which we were very much ready to do. Like we were 100%. If there's one thing the Marine Corps could do in 2001, 2002, it's train to fight the Iraqis. 100%. We did a lot of, we did some urban ops, military operations, and urban training. A lot of NBC, which is like CBRN now, which was like we're in the mission-oriented protective posture, gas mask, put on a full suit, go through decon. So we did a lot of ops. We did a lot of hikes like that. Very difficult. That was very, very important.
Yeah, I bet that was miserable.
We at that point in time, we did a lot of humps. Like we would hump, every month. And I don't even know. They were upwards of probably 30-ish miles. They were far. They were very far through other trains. So like I remember, I think before Christmas of 2002, we were out at the Mount Town, like the urban warfare site up Pendleton, and we humped back. I remember that. We humped back. So a lot of offense, a lot of defense, a lot of live fire. Did some helo operations, a lot of mech stuff. Like we went to 29 Palms, did some mech stuff, with the AAVs. We touched on a little bit of low intensity stuff. I remember we did some vehicle checkpoints, and that was kind of like we might have to do this kind of thing maybe, like after the war, blah, blah, blah. So we like kind of how do you search a vehicle? And that was like there was very much a taste and the flavor of Northern Ireland on that. A lot of that was from the British, and that carried over to where we had these ideas. We had these ideas of what this was going to be like after the war or after, and the only thing we really could model was what the British had done previously, and that seemed reasonable at the time. But that was like the low intensity asymmetrical warfare, rather than, I don't know what you call it, like more high intensity type of thing where we're talking about IEDs. Ed Card was our company commander back then. I remember specifically it was a company formation. He's like, there's a thing called an IED. It's called an improvised explosive device. And I was like, that's interesting. Yeah, and that was known. That's like the term for it, right? We just didn't know it was going to be a 155 round that the Iraqis had tons of. And then, in Afghanistan, it would have its own, the yellow jug thing, But I remember him speaking those words when I was like, 19, I guess. And I was like, that's weird,
What was your MOS?
I was an 0311, so I was an
0311.
Yeah.
Excellent. Nice ground pounder. So as you guys are working up, and I think I remember you talking about training on the podcast you were with your buddy that
y'all you want to talk about the grappling hooks?
Yeah, y'all still had collapsible ladders, and
so that was I think me and Nick Roberts talked about this not that long ago. So it was a tactic. So the windows at the Mount Town at Camp Pendleton had a metal frame around them. The intention of, because they're cinder block buildings, the intention is that it's going to catch the grappling hook. Anybody that's listening to this right now from the 90s or before, they know this to be true, but it just seems so ridiculous. So these are specially made for the grappling hooks, okay? So, and we would try to like scale the wall with a grappling hook. And I've done this myself with I have like a saw in mop gear. So I have the mop boots on, which have no tread, mind you. This is just like, this seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
Because you want to be able to get to the top, and we're going to clear down. I guess that's a way to do it. Same thing with the ladders we're using. I think there was a squad leader named Sergeant Keith who he was a big guy, and I remember him running up one of these like ladders, and it was just like you could just see it being crushed. And it was like the next guy was like, I don't think I'm going to go up that, But these are the kind of ideas that and this is like one of the most dangerous things about when you watch like the Ukraine-Russia war, when you look at potential like ground operations related to Iran and those areas, you have no idea what's going to go on. You're not prepared to your technology, especially at the tactical, like infantry level. You're not ready. Like the drone thing, it's like you just don't know as much as you want to think about it. And the people that did think about this were not stupid people. This seemed reasonable at the time, but the reality of it was much different. Yeah,
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know, and it never turns out to be the way you probably think it's going to be.
Man, that is so wild to see the ramp up and the learning curve there at the start. With the training that's going on, how long as it's taking place until you start to get either rumors or definitive word down the pipeline of where exactly you'll be going into Iraq?
So I think in January of 2003, this is kind of a while ago. I think that's when we deployed, or February, somewhere around that time. We knew we were going to Kuwait, and there was speculation if we were just going to kind of build up on the border and then try to have, they're going to have some kind of parlay negotiations with the Iraqis, kind of like it's like Desert Fox occurred in like 98, 99. It was kind of a similar circumstance. But there was like the entire 1st Marine Division, 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, everybody and their mom was in Kuwait at this point in time. So it's like, that's kind of a lot of people for a bluff. But I mean, I wasn't knowing that at the time. I was just like smoking cigarettes in a fighting hole with my buddy. It was, that's the letter from General Mattis, which was distributed to everybody in the division. So then, in March, that's when we crossed the border. As far as like OIF-1 goes, I can tell you I do not have a ton of memories really of that. So I think it's like one of the things, you're in the back of a track all day, all night. We stopped dig fighting holes. The first night was probably the most disorienting / eventful. So we were attached to 2nd Tank Battalion. As they led through our portion of the breach, and there was Iraqis there. There were still, you could hear over the net. There was like, contact front. They had like T-72s, BRDMs, BMPs, troops in the open, and they were just cut down like it was nothing to the tankers. The tankers ran through them like it was nothing. I was actually, I was meeting with a friend yesterday. He was an Army tanker guy in the Gulf, and we were kind of talking about like it was nothing to the Abrams tank is just like it's like a death machine.
Oh yeah.
And the tankers are really good at all tanker stuff. Like they're exceptionally good at it. And a lot of it though too is you can kind of see it on video or documentaries on YouTube of what an Abrams looks like, shooting from a static position, or it can drive and fire. It was nighttime though too. So you could just hear all this shooting and just destruction. They just cut them down like it was. I'm not even sure if we got out of the tracks maybe once or twice that night to hold some security, but there was nothing left. The next morning, it was like we were in the oil fields, and there was a lot of Iraqis like surrendering, that kind of thing, at least in our area.
Were the oil fields on fire at this time?
Some of them were, I don't actually have very many pictures from that point in time, but like, also I think a lot of it though too is like, they call it being a boot in the Marine Corps. It's like boot view, where, all you care about is like chow libo and like sleep, like I was just holding my sector of fire, your team leader's running around with the squad leader. So that was kind of like my, like my small view of what was going on at that point in time. That's actually a picture of my squad. There's Nick Roberts right next to me, to my right. Pete Bergstrom, who passed away unfortunately some years ago. Ryan Nieto, kind of where your cursor is. Great guy. Eric Robles, both him. Just great guys. They're great guys. That was actually in Yusufia. So this photo is actually taken. So we went all the way to Baghdad. I think the most significant contact I participated in was we were fighting in Saddam City, later Sadr City, where we ran into a significant element of like Saddam Fedayeen, like their paramilitary irregular guys, which did a lot of the fighting as far as that we were involved in, like the regular conventional Iraqi army. All those guys down in southern Iraq, it wasn't really a delaying action. The Iraqis, leadership just left them there. And, General Mattis, I believe, tried to get their division commander to surrender prior to, and the guy couldn't surrender. So, I kind of have low respect for the Iraqi commanders who, put the guys in that kind of position where it's like, There's no
Just
real
to be
advantage.
slaughtered.
There's no advantage to them tactically, operationally, or strategically. But I was actually speaking with somebody else about that. But yeah, Saddam Fatahin, that was like the most significant firefight I think we saw during that, which was like kind of an all day fight with them before we got into Baghdad. And it was kind of like a leapfrog. I think 2-5 took the lead initially, then 3-5, and then because we were operating as a regiment, and then 1-5 took the lead into Baghdad. And they saw some pretty significant contact as they were going in there. I'm talking to guys years later.
Wow. And were at this point in time, you mentioned the Fedayeen, was this all homegrown Iraqis and such, no foreign influence starting to come in yet? That was a little bit later on when supposedly the Chechens and the others started coming in, the North Africans and all of that, or?
I don't want to pretend to be like a geo strategist, but like from my perspective and my personal experience and belief, like most of the Iraqis, the Baathists are nationalists. They don't have a natural, kind of the same way in the United States, I would consider it. Like they're strongly Iraqi, the jihadi, way I think that we think of, like Muslim nations and how they operate. It's not really what Iraq's like. We were fighting a lot of people that didn't want us to be in their country. And I think that a lot of the things you saw later, like, Al-Qaeda in Iraq and like the foreign fighters thing was kind of, that was a different type of representation of people that like kind of opposed us in that region. It's kind of, I think it's very fluid. We kind of like to break things down into like really simple.
This was still like if someone invaded us, and it would be people like standing and fighting whoever was invading us, kind of.
Right. And I think you'd see a lot of different groups. So people are nationalists, people that were like church groups. You'd see a lot of, varying, factions that aren't necessarily, we kind of, I think, especially now in the West, where we ideologically identify with like, are you in my ideology or are you in that other one? What kind of social media do you follow? This was kind of a more simplistic concept of like, hey, they didn't want us here. And at that point in time, I think even in that short period of time, they saw their performance when they were trying to stand toe to toe in conventional mode doesn't work. So that naturally they're going to switch to a more asymmetric style. Which is basically the only option they had, where they continued on.
Yeah, IEDs and all of that starting to pop up more and more.
And that's how that. So we got into Baghdad. I think we were at the Baghdad College, and it was over. As far as like that phase of the operation, we went down to southern Iraq. We were in a city called Samawa. We were at a train station. And there was a really brief period. This guy, Jeff Barron, he was the company police sergeant. And we were set up at a vet clinic, and we would go on patrols without, I think squads went out without body armor. They would just wear like chest rigs, and go out. And Jeff went on, he needed to get chow. We were getting chow from battalion, which was at the train station, and we were at the vet clinic inside the town of Samawa. And I got in a Humvee with him, slick top, him and I don't think we had body armor on, and we drove through traffic to the train station and got chow or whatever and drove back. Which at the time was this is, and we were like standing post and we were doing our thing, and I'm hanging out with Nick Roberts, and it was Chris Henderson, like a lot of really great guys that I came up with back then. It seemed like, oh, we've liberated Iraq from tyranny. This is great. After that, we co-located. We went to battalion at the train station. We were there for a bit. And then we got a mission. I'm not exactly sure how this panned out, but Echo 25, I was an Echo company. We went up to Yusufia, back up north to do counterinsurgency after Army logistics trains were getting struck by IEDs. So, we went up there. We had like mortar attack. We were in this potato factory. It's funny how little I remember about this. I have good notes from later deployments, but when I was like 19, 20, it's like, what's going on? We had a mortar attack. We had some contact with the enemy, some firefights. It was definitely a sign of things to come up there. And we eventually retrograded and we came back in like August 2003. So we came back home. We had a parade through Oceanside, California. We won the war. It was great. I don't know if you heard about it. Nothing to worry about, nothing to see here. We came back, and then I think it was already planned that the Marines were going to participate in the early phases of like occupation, because 1-5 went back out in January of 04, and 2-4 was on the Rock. So they were on Okinawa. They stayed there for like 12 months because they'd been on UDP, Unit Deployment Program, out there. So they came back and they were first in the chute. So they went out with 1-5, and they both 2-4 went to Ramadi, and 1-5 was I'm not sure where they were at initially. They were in like the first attempt into Fallujah with that limited penetration, but they were around that area at that point in time. So things quickly, and then that was heating up. 2-4. There's a really good book. I can get you a title of it. It's about them in Ramadi and just like how difficult it was for them, because we went back when we went to Iraq the second time. We relieved 2-4. So we started this workup, basically getting information from 2-4 while they were out there. At one point, we prepared to deploy. So Echo 2-5, we had some turnover. We got some new leadership. Eric Doherty, who's a retired Marine colonel, he took over as the company commander. Wow. I still talk to him pretty frequently. He's a good friend. He's one of the guys, a strong personality. He knows he's one of those guys, even as a captain, he kind of had leadership beyond his years, as far as like motivating people, understanding people, which I have, over the years, I've seen people who are just like fantastic leaders, because a great leader can really bring out the best in people. And Eric Doherty's definitely one of those people. So he took over the company. His background was, he was also a 1-6 guy, but he was also in Fast Company, and he ran the close quarter battles school. So he was big into fighting inside buildings, because he figured that the most dangerous thing we're going to do is fight inside a building. So we did a lot of urban stuff during that workup. And I'm not even actually sure, from my limited perspective, even on this point in time, like how the pre-deployment training plan was structured. But we still had, so we were going through some training. We call it SASO, Security and Stability Operations, at that point in time. And in Victorville, California, there's like in March Air Force Base, there was base housing there for the Air Force that was like condemned. So we would train there. And it was kind of one of those things where we're trying to put this together, where we're like, let me imagine what this is going to be like, and, like I remember doing ops and like things that make sense. Base housing, it's like, we want to breach this house, so let's run a NAM-TRAC into it, and then we can run inside. You can't do that in an Iraqi building. But like, you work with what you got, right? I remember the British Army was there as well, and they came out with some people, and they would talk about Ireland stuff, essentially, like what they talked about, what they knew, like a low intensity conflict, and and at that point in time, I think I read Immediate Action by Andy McNabb, who is an SAS guy, Bravo 20, and his book Immediate Action, he talks about when he was a squatty, like a soldier in Northern Ireland, and like, how they would do things. And they called it like ballooning, where you'd like take a knee and just kind of move up and down. So if a sniper was looking at you, it's still kind of harder to hit you, and how they would bomb burst. And they call it like when they would run the rabbit, like run across the street. And then another guy would run maybe in a different direction.
Wow.
But that was just, I remember reading that and thinking like, oh, I wonder how applicable this is. But it's just a different context. So, but we were trying, right? So that's really all you can do. So we kind of wrapped all that together in our training. So I think this is also a point where we got a little bit more cultural understanding. Because like even today, people don't know the difference between a Pashtun and an Arab, or Persian. It's all kind of opaque to most people. And then we're not even talking about tribal stuff. And to this day, then I can't even explain the tribal part, because that is a different part than the religious or cultural part. It's like, I was trying to distill like where you live compared to where I lived in like the 1800s. It's very.
Were y'all at this time, was the Marine Corps wide, or were certain units starting to take on Indige or native interpreters? Because I think one of your photos, you have a few ended soldiers with you working with
Right.
y'all.
That was in Afghanistan when we kind of got more hip to that kind of thing. And I have actually some notes on that experience and how we decided to implement that. It wasn't exactly to like the Army SF Green Beret standard, so I can tell you how that went. So we kind of got a little bit smarter on that as far as like the cultural stuff. We kind of understood at that point that like the culture of tribal religious stuff where they were like separate factors, but we were still like not that up with it yet. And then September that of 2004, we went to Ramadi and relieved 2-4. As far as Ramadi goes, it's difficult. It's urban terrain. It's difficult terrain. So that's both the human and the literal terrain, like dealing with people. Anybody that's ever been to Iraq knows that like every house is essentially like a castle. Like it's got an exterior wall that you have to negotiate. There's like the roof has a parapet, you can shoot from. The walls are super thick. So it's like,
A nightmare.
Right. It makes it a nightmare. It's a full on city. And I think that there's a movie called Three Kings. Have you ever seen it with like Mark
Great
Wahlberg?
movie. Yes.
Yeah. And I think they go to Nazareth inside that movie. And they showed
Looking
like
for the gold.
there's like a well. And there's like some women like fully like blacked out burk it out with like some thatch huts and stuff. Like Nazareth is a massive city. Like there's and it's just kind of like and this is 1998, 97 when this movie came out. So the only thing they know is looking up in a library book, right?
Yeah.
So it's just when you get there, all these things are happening in the city. Like people are buying and selling cars. There's people with shops. There's like a full city is operating around you.
Still going on.
It's not like just this war is happening. The war is happening, but there is a ton of other stuff happening too. So you're seeing a lot of things. It's hard to interpret what's going on. I think that one of the most difficult things, like all AMBAR was kind of the Marines. That was one MEF. The MEFs were out there. The Marine Corps ran all AMBAR during these OIF years. And there's something kind of like spectral and scary about like these cities, because they're out there, that they pretty much can attack for the most part, especially during this point in time when they wanted to. So we were having like various degrees of success. I remember early on trying to do meetings. I think the company leadership at that point in time, like Eric Doherty, he would go out and do like the meetings with some of the tribal cats, the city officials. The battalion commander was trying to do the same thing. That's kind of like the early on, drinking tea and shaking hands, kiss babies type thing, where you're trying to develop some kind of relationships with people, amongst the Iraqis.
Did y'all get when you first came in and relieved 2-4? Did y'all get maybe like a briefing of sort or a lay of the land of what occurred with them, to where y'all could kind of have a foot to at least step through the door with?
We call it left seat, right seat, and we do it typically in phases where we'll send the platoon, like we'll send leaders in for a leader's recon, like squad leaders, platoon commander, platoon sergeant, in with the other unit. And so they can go out with them, and then we'll keep some of their key leaders will stay with us as we do there. We call it left seat, right seat.
Okay.
Right seat, and then you get the left seat. So, and that's pretty much how we did OIF, OEF. Like during these, like one unit's in, we come and relieve them. That's kind of like the process we go through. 2-4 had a very difficult deployment. That book they talk about, I didn't realize how junior the battalion was. Like they did not get a lot of training time, because if you ever look at their casualties, there's a really nice memorial at San Mateo at 5th Marines. There's like PFC's names on the wall. They're not Lance Corporals, which indicates to you how junior they are. So that lets you know like where in the cycle those guys came from infantry training battalion and when they went out the door for that deployment. So
would it be this list right here, or was that later on?
That's the 2-5 list. The 2-4 list, I believe they had quite a few PFCs on there.
Oh wow.
Gosh. But that's the way it goes. I was talking to my friend Assad Khan. He has a podcast as well. He was the battalion commander for 1-6 in Afghanistan in 2004. And when he was a battalion commander, he was not happy with like how the breakdown between when he got his boot drop from SOI and when he was going to have to deploy, he felt, like everybody's got to do your mission, but you're just like, why is this restricted training window? It's everybody's trying to advocate for their own unit, right? But like you get the time you have, but it's rough when you have to take out, people who are more junior than you'd like. Obviously, things could always be better, but I think that's just kind of always one of those factors.
And when y'all get there, and Captain Doherty has done his shall we say meet and greets and all of that, what kind of with this being, like you said, a full-on city and everything, what kind of operations, missions, what is about to start taking place?
Yeah, I think he can definitely speak better to that, or like some of the other guys. Ryan Schrammel was my platoon commander during that time period. So we would go out, I'm trying to think. So we had some pretty significant contact in the beginning. Marine of my platoon, Jason Poindexter, he was killed basically like the first day of operations from a suicide car bomb. We had, so in Ramadi, there's a main route called Michigan that ran east to west. I think it runs all the way from basically Baghdad, like the Syrian border. The play was to have observation posts in succession along the route. So basically we could observe the route. Nobody could put in IEDs. Didn't work. It's just too complex for that. So that was like one of the big things, was manning those OPs, doing security patrols around the OPs, doing targeted raids on places we believed could have like enemy weapons caches.
God,
that type of thing. Large clears, large clearing operations where we would go, block to block, very difficult, very hot, very labor intensive as you're just going from building to building, kind of like a leapfrog. You take contact somewhere down the street, and that would kind of change the dynamic. And do you bypass these other houses to chase these other guys? Are you getting sucked into another ambush or another IED? And that's just kind of like the rhythm of it. So it was very, very difficult, very, terrain to operate in.
Are you guys at this point in time only like in Generation Kill, or are y'all only in regular thin-skinned Humvees? Do y'all have an armor unit or capability?
So the way that broke down was when 2-4 was there, I think they started with slick vehicles, and then they started getting armor kits, and then they got it. I believe somebody else can correct me on this, but like then they got, I think when we were there was when we first started getting some of the up armored specific vehicles that were actually made that way. But I think most of our vehicles, none of which like survived the deployment. All the vehicles were destroyed. Like no vehicles, I don't believe. Somebody could comment on that, but they put them together with whatever they could get, whatever armor they got. So our weapons platoon, like as a Marine line company is organized, you have a headquarters platoon, 3 line platoons or rifle platoons, and then weapons platoon, which is where we'd have machine guns, assault, and 60 millimeter mortars. We just took them and then we made them into our company specific mobile section. And that was run by, at that point in time, we had Matt Hayes, Kevin Armentrout, a good friend of mine. They were running that section. Henry Oceanow was the platoon sergeant. Lieutenant Paul Felsberg, he was the platoon commander who was killed fairly early on, but they were doing a lot of those missions. I preferred being a line platoon because I would rather be on foot and be able to navigate through alleys and go through, wherever our weapons company was, they were vehicled up. So, in the battalion, we have a weapons company as well. They were all in vehicles and they would take contact, Reading, Michigan, trying to get to Fox and Golf were on the east side of the city, and Echo is kind of on the west side. And the amount of contact they would take was just unbelievable when they were picked up.
Yeah, that almost sounds like Black Hawk Down, and if you were in a vehicle, that sounds like
that movie came out in like 2001, and there were so many parallels, I think, for a lot of people. Like, that was like a really intense, like short burst. This is kind of like that, like it was just kind of dribbled out across like these multi-month deployments.
Man, that I can't imagine what it's like for you guys, and I'm assuming some of the guys with you, since you mentioned earlier on the big gap in combat, that this is a lot of guys, this is the first time in actual combat.
Yeah, it kind of felt like that. It didn't really feel like OIF 1, at least from my perspective. Like a lot of people did see, a lot more up close and personal stuff during OIF 1. If you ever look at like Sean Tosh, Navy Crosswinter, clearing trenches and like switching out an AK. That wasn't really my experience in OIF 1. There was some contact with the enemy, but this was a lot more up close and personal. And I think there's something much different when it's like when you're in a squad and you're in a contact or you're in a platoon. You're not moving as a company, which I can kind of talk about later, like during some of the Afghanistan stuff, where it's like when it's toe-to-toe conventional mode, where you think you're going to stand against us, which is not going to happen. We're going to use fires. We're going to move under mortars. We're going to use smoke. We're going to use machine guns. We're going to do all these things too. You basically have no chance, even against just a company organic, tool set. Like you have very low chance of being able to survive. But when it's like squad, the cat and mouse type thing, where we're moving, it's nighttime, and it's the asymmetric is where they're strong, right?
Yeah. Luring, like you said, luring you into the ambushes,
trying to figure out what. Yeah, and we had there's Marines, Barrow and Hubbard. They actually grew up together. They were killed in our sniper platoon. They went inside a house that was booby trapped. And that would happen like periodically throughout OIF, where you'd hear about these kinds of things where you never know when you'd receive contact, small arms fire, were they trying to channel you into an area, into a building or into a courtyard. So, and that went on into Afghanistan, where that's a very, effective tactic. It makes you always second guess any of your immediate action drills, any of your tactics, because, it's an easy way to degrade that.
We've seen some of the movies, and I'm not sure early on, but of course 5, 6, 7 on snipers playing a role in cities, and were y'all seeing any? I know they're taking long shots, but I mean actual good shooters taking qualified shots at y'all.
There were. Nick Roberts was actually shot by a sniper, very severely injured during that. There were some really professional snipers at that point in time. 2-4 before we got there, there was an observation post called, we call it OP Ghetto because it was in the ghetto, where they had Caminetti masking the roof, and I believe this is a correct story. At least that's how it was recounted to me. If this isn't accurate, somebody can correct me. But like they had little openings that you could kind of look through, and I believe they were masked. And somebody like a Marine was on post, and he like lifted it up, and then he was shot like right in the face from a considerable distance too. So they did have professional snipers out there. I would also say though, we also had every Marine Infantry Battalion has a Scout Sniper Platoon. That Scout Sniper Platoon had Tim Lesage, Eddie Syke, another good friend of mine, and they killed a lot of enemy. Wow. And I can tell you, every sniper platoon that I went on deployments with, they killed a lot of the enemy, a lot, from how they operated. They were the Marine sniper program is fantastic.
That sounds like that was a throwback to the glory days of Vietnam, where snipers were actually of high value, on both sides, mind you.
They were, I think that too, particularly later on, like the Garmser deployment I did in Afghanistan, where it 1-6 sniper platoon. Because I mean, with their optics, that level of training, their proficiency, I mean, they were killing a lot of enemy. This was also that time frame too, where the ACOG came out, the Trijicon Advanced Combat Optical Gun Sight, which we deployed with. And I think that was during that transition time, because 2-4 deployed with those, that OIF 2 TAC 1, they deployed with a full set like of ACOGs, and like the enemy was surprised when people were getting shot in the face, like consistently, because they did not know that we had optics, because that's not something they had organic to them at that point in time. So a lot of they thought that they definitely had to change their tactics up, because when they would appear, typically like they were seeing a lot more their own KIA during that phase too. So that was pretty surprising to them.
Man, oh man, wow. So with this being so kinetic and y'all clearly working and having a lot of work to do, are are y'all getting anybody to come in to help? Are y'all there the whole 13 months and then wait until y'all are relieved, or what's going on up until y'all start to head out after running ops?
So we did like basically 6-month deployment cycles. I think the Army would do like the 12-month, 13-month, like longer ones. So yeah, we were there. We eventually got some combat replacements that came in as kind of casualties mounted to like bolster our numbers. I think a lot of them came from 3rd Marines out in Hawaii. Yeah. But yeah, we kind of stuck it out there. And a lot of it like ebbs and flows too. Like you won't get contact for a while. It's winter time in 2004, 2005, where it gets super cold. And things, it's very inconsistent. You don't really know like what is going
Fighting
on,
season,
right?
kind of thing.
Yeah, it's almost like fighting season, but then sometimes like you'll get hit and you don't know. And I actually have my first sergeant, Wayne Peterson. He actually wrote like a pretty detailed journal from that. I actually have a copy of that, which I've read through. And I think he's probably recorded about everything that occurred that deployment on there. But a lot of the time it seemed like from my perspective, where it's, you're still just like a guy in a team where, seems like there's not a lot that happens, then something does happen. You're trying to stay sharp and, not get complacent. Cause I think that's one of the most difficult things about counterinsurgency in like the urban, especially the urban environment where, like you're just trying to stay sharp and not get tired and not, not make those comfort-based decisions when you're out there.
Yeah. Complacency kills, as they say.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So when you guys start getting towards get the replacements in and as the 6 months start winding up, are y'all slated to go back stateside, or do y'all go to Okinawa, or what's the shipment home process?
Yeah, we went right back to Camp Pendleton, right back to California. Yeah, I had orders at that point in time, so I'd re-enlisted while we were in Ramadi. So I was getting ready to check out and go to my go to a training job. So
wow.
Yeah, we got back I think in March of 2005.
Did what brought on your decision to train, or was it not your decision?
It was I can't remember how I picked that job. So the career monitor was out there, so I went to be like a firearms instructor for recruit training for like boot camp at Edson Range, a weapons still training battalion. So that just seemed like a thing to do at the time. I'm not exactly sure how I decided upon that as being because in retrospect I probably would have picked something else if it wasn't for the people I got to meet along the way. But like as far as the work goes, I probably would have picked like something else. But
well, I mean, having you there as a fresh combat deployed true Marine coming back to train new guys coming in, I got to think that's a hell of a good thing, not only for the Marine Corps and those guys, but you passing along all the knowledge and stuff you had picked up and get guys ready, because presumably these dudes will be in Afghanistan or Iraq in 6-8 months time,
Yeah, so I mean that's I tried to embrace that philosophy. So I went over there in like June of 2005, still at Camp Pendleton, training the recruits, and that could be some long days, especially on the line when you could have 3 targets, 6 3 targets, 6 relays, so that's like 18 recruits, morning and afternoon, and it could be some long days. I will say it definitely gave me a love for marksmanship that I didn't have before. And this is like the known distance course that was with iron sights, where it was that was actually a fun part, especially like later on when I had more higher billets, when I was like a block NCO, when I could have like the PMI target or like I could bring troubleshooters in and just work with them individually in whatever position at range we were kind of working at. And that was actually pretty fun and pretty enjoyable. Having my own recruits, having like 18 recruits, especially like in the September, October, November, they call it the herds come through, like after high school graduates. You got these big groups of recruits, and and they're all like boot camped up too. So it's really hard to like talk to them at an individual level when you're trying to like diagnose, like if they're looking at the target, or if they're anticipating the shot, or if they're jerking the trigger, or they're staring at the target. what does their sight alignment look like when they just say like, yes or no, sir, and it's like, I need you to kind of elaborate on what's happening here, right?
Were they pretty good? I mean, I know everybody's going to be different, but were relatively were you getting pretty good shots in there? Or did you have to work real hard with some of the guys to
anybody can shoot. Shooting is the American sport, in my opinion, and
Absolutely.
anybody can shoot if you have the digits. If you have one digit on your hand, maybe not even that. Maybe you could have a prosthesis to use it.
Now you can. Yeah.
Anybody can shoot. So that's why everybody should shoot. So I'm an advocate for marksmanship in general. So, everybody got to a point or got better. Even I, just shooting there, got so much better. Like with the rifle, it took me longer to do pistol more effectively, but like with the rifle, yeah, for sure.
Wow, that's really cool to hear. You getting to not only do that to help the young men coming in, but also you getting to shoot and falling in love with marksmanship. That's really cool. My father always to the day he died loved shooting. He loved it from well before the Corps, but especially after the Corps.
Yeah. While I was there, I met. Actually, I was talking to you before we started the show. My friend Dan Trackwell. He was on the range with me, and he was from 1st Battalion, 6th Marines, and he did their Afghanistan deployment in 2004 before he went to the range, where Assad Khan was the battalion commander. And he loved 1-6. He loved it there. He had a great time there. He did an Okinawa deployment, and he did that MU, that Marine Expeditionary Unit float where they went to Afghanistan. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. This was early-ish 2007, and he said, I'm going to go back. I'm going to get orders and go back to 1-6. And he said, Ryan, you should go with me. So I opened my flip phone at the time, and and sometimes in retrospect, I don't even know how I did anything. So I somehow had the monitor's phone number, or staffing person, called him, and I was like, hey, do you have any 0-11 sergeant spots at 1-6? And he said, yep, you got orders coming. And I was like, hey, you didn't even have to look at anything,
Wow.
So orders hit the next day, and me and Dan were off to 1st Battalion, 6th Marines in North Carolina. So I packed up, drove across country. Got out there, was horrified when I got to Jacksonville. I was pretty surprised by how it's very different than Portland, different than San Diego, Los Angeles, Orange County. Always lived on the West Coast, right? California, Oregon. So I got out there, and I remember Dan telling me what hotel I should stay at when I got in town, which was like disgusting. And I could talk about Dan at length on a lot of different stories, but he was taking his son to go see Transformers that day. Like, it just came out in theaters in 2007.
Wow.
He's like, yeah, come check out this. You can stay at this hotel over here, and there's a bar there in the lobby. So that was my Jacksonville intro with Dan. And so we both, he's already checked into the battalion. I went and I checked in, and they assigned me to Alpha Company 1-6, which would be my home for the next 5 years. Alpha 1-6 is definitely like where my heart is as far as like Marine Corps stuff goes. And we started a workup for as part of the 24th MU. We were going to be their battalion landing team. We were the helo company, so we flew around a lot. We did a lot of raids. We did a lot of live fire. It was a really great time. So at that point, I just went to sergeant's course not that long ago. Stephen Vallejo was in my company, and Vallejo was one of my senior guys at 2-5 during my first deployment. So he was there, and he was running the mortar section I think at that point in time. So I was in second platoon. Sean Miller was platoon commander, very, very awesome Marine officer at the time. Galen Hafner was the platoon sergeant. And yeah, we did that training workup, and I'm not exactly sure when. I think it was January of 2008. It was like after Christmas, where they were like, hey, we're probably going to go to Helmand Province. We're going to go to Afghanistan. And we were like, oh, wow. In my platoon, I had a friend of mine, Patrick Main. He was the other squad leader. He was first squad leader. I was second squad leader. Me and Pat were together for 2 deployments. Matt Hall was third squad leader. He actually joined up. He was actually a tow gunner by trade, but he took over a line squad. So we all deployed together, and we went to I'm trying to think of where we staged. CAF. We were getting our airfield. So CAF was down in southern Afghanistan at that point in time. Trying to figure out what was going on. We didn't know what we were going to do. We heard we were going to do ops like we were going to do. I think the Army had some kind of like helo-borne unit there. It was the 101st or the 520. Yeah, it's all the Army stuff. It's hard to understand. A lot of numbers. Especially for Marines. But so they were doing like some kind of like raid force, quick reaction helo thing. That's what we thought we were going to do. And the big joke was we were going to do an operation in Garmser, and somebody in the comments will definitely say something. I think they said it was going to be like 7 to 10 days. That's it. We're just going to go in there, clear them out, then come back to CAF. That's not what happened. So we did a helo assault in. And so at this point in time, like Garmser, of the 5 deployments I did, was kind of like some type of like G.I. Joe perfect deployment. It was the perfect area for the battalion landing team to go into and to attack. We had all the assets you wanted. We had the air combat element. They tried to hold, but we cleared them out. It was very conventional. We went through, we crushed them very quickly. We had all combined arms at that point in time. So we would hit, we would use mortars, we'd use close air support, we would use artillery, we'd use all the toys were in full use for the Garmser operation. So we cleared that area out, and then we broke down to doing squad and platoon level ops. And they as far as our area goes, they did not return. They didn't come back into the area. They retrograded and stayed out for the remainder of that deployment. So that gave me a lot of opportunity. My squad, I had Mike Canner as a team leader and Evan Sitzman. They're both very, very, very good team leaders, great guys. Zach Bell from Veterans Assigned, he was in my squad. Super, yeah, that's the crew right there. Great dudes.
A lot of young faces right there, boy.
A lot of really young guys. You got Sean Miller, our platoon commander, over on the right, standing. Great guys. So we did a lot of Mike Cantor is to my left and Evan Sitzman is to my right. So we started doing a lot of training. So a lot of the junior guys, they started planning and leading like patrols. So we would go out, we would practice doing like an orders process, do fragmentary orders, doing, map study and figuring out like different objectives. Like we would go out and set up an ambush, basically an ambush to nowhere. We knew we were probably not going to ambush anyone, but instead of setting up as an observation post, they would actually set up like in an ambush position. So just to get these kinds of reps in, because we were on real terrain. We had the opportunity to do this. We had at that point in time, we had really good relationships with the locals there too. So yeah, that was awesome. Yeah,
a good photo of y'all with the locals, right? Is that the same tour or deployment?
That was in Marja, but very fairly similar stuff. Yeah, talking to the kids. Wow. That was we did in Garmser. That's where we saw a few of these. We call it like census operations. So we would take areas and we would go through and we would ask everybody like their name and what tribe they're from and how many people live in the house. How much damage, because we paid reparations for homes that were damaged during the fighting, during the clearing. And that was a labor intensive.
I can't imagine.
I could tell you, that was not very popular.
No. Oh man.
It was very, very, we had one Marine in the battalion, KIA from Sniper Platoon, Cooper. We had some pretty intense fights. Charlie Company took Jugram Fort, and I know they had some pretty intense fighting out there. But as far as some kind of feeling of accomplishment, that deployment was a pretty good example of we went in, we did it. We didn't get to go back to CAF, that was fine, but we got a lot out of it. We spent a lot of time together. It was really months of just we were just hanging out in compounds, walking around in our underwear, drinking, showering out of wells and eating MREs. It was actually it was pretty good deployment.
Did you mentioned having earlier having a wide spectrum of forces being utilized, air support and all of that. Does 1/6 the squads all have, or do y'all have a designated Anglico Marine or a JTAC, or
I'm actually about to get to that. That's
okay.
actually something I was actually about to talk about that.
Excellent.
Something that happened during the Marja workup, which links directly to what you're just talking about. We had our air shop. We had a forward air controller with us. I can't remember his name. Smitty. I might be wrong on that. I think he was a C-130 guy, but he ran a lot of the air for us. I'm glad you mentioned that because I forgot. I took some notes and there was something I wanted to talk about. And you totally reminded me about that.
Heck yeah, I'm glad. We've been talking to some Anglico guys here recently, both GWAT and Vietnam, so always interested in that.
Yeah. So we came back after that, and we started a pretty long workup. Well, I mean, I don't even know if it was really a workup. We got back in October of 2008, and we went into like slow mode for like 3 or 4 months. It was a great time. Not a lot going on. I think we got a boot drop before Christmas, somewhere around Christmas. New guys showed up, and we started basically almost like a year-long workup. I want to say in like January, February 2009. I think we went to the rifle range, and we had kind of a new group of people showing up. And this was probably one of one of the things about the Marine Corps is just being around so many great people. Carl Havens was the company commander. Sean Miller, my platoon commander, he became the executive officer. We got Gunny Walgren as our company gunny of the famous Gunny Walgren speech. Jeremy Mason was the first sergeant. Walgren and Mason actually called me last week on a conference call, and I talked to them for about an hour. They're just great people.
That's awesome.
Dave Emerson, he was my platoon commander. He took over 2nd platoon. He's still in. He's lieutenant colonel. And Stephen Vallejo came over as the platoon sergeant. Last year, I got to go to Parris Island and watch him retire. He was the gunner, the infantry weapons officer in charge of marksmanship training for basically the Marine Corps recruit training on the East Coast. Another great guy. We had already done 2 deployments together. So we made up 2nd platoon. We had the new company staff. Pat Main was still first squad leader. We had a lot of people stay over. So this is one of the only times there's a natural ebb and flow rotation of NCOs and like staff NCOs, like the staff non-commissioned officers. We call it everybody E6 through E9 in the Marine Corps. So we had a bunch of people stay. So it got really strong really fast. So I was still there. Pat Main was still there. Brian Cage, one of my good friends, him and Andrew Rouser and Bill B were all in 3rd platoon, on a 2nd deployment. John Trickler, he was in 1st platoon, and he was like a grown 1-6 guy, like Ramadi. They were in Ramadi before Garmser. He was in Ramadi and in Garmser, and then he's a squad leader in Marja. He's still in. I believe he's the first sergeant. He might be a sergeant major now. Need to check on that. So really strong unit leaders, up and coming guys. Zach Bell took over team. Wendell Sanders, Mitch Schilling. He came from security forces. One of our team leader, squad leader, Zach Grube. It was a very, very strong group of guys. Very strong, very cohesive, and it really showed during the workup with, we knew how to train. We knew how to run squads. We knew how to run platoons. We knew how to do these more complex tasks. We knew how to train. We knew how to train Marines. We knew so much more when you go on to that 2nd deployment as like a sergeant squad leader. It's a completely different kind of world when we're doing that kind of thing. So we did a variety of training. Went to APL a couple times.
To what?
AP Hill. It's an Army fort, Army base up in Virginia. There's Fort Pickett and there's Fort AP Hill or just AP Hill. It's Marines go up there to train pretty typically. I think the Army might also. So you'd go up there. The other big distinguishing portion of this was our air officer was a senior captain named Alex Rampton, and he is still in. He's a colonel in the Marine Corps. He's a Harrier pilot. He decided he wanted like a special operations quality tactical air control party. I don't know where he came up with this idea. I haven't talked to him. I've talked to him a couple times over the years. I actually probably should text him today to tell him I was talking about him on a podcast. But he decided he wanted some like commando level, like air control, artillery, indirect. Like he wanted fires and he wanted to own everything. And that is exactly what he did. I'm not sure how he came up with the idea, and I'm not sure how he got support for it. But he trained a bunch of us. We went to Joint Fires Observer School and JTAC school. I don't know. At this point in time, this was not that common, I don't think. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this was his baby or not, but he got a lot of school seats and he did a lot of training. Wow. A lot. He got a lot of, we went up to Oriental, North Carolina, and we're like, you know, targeting ships and like talking to aircraft off the coast from a carrier. The Canadians came down, Canadian JTACs, and this was Meatloaf was Alex's call sign. So this is like a Meatloaf show. You know, we went out and we did a bunch of call for fire. I can't remember where else we were training at, but he did a lot. He really bent over backwards because he thought, and you know, our battalion commander, Cal Worth, he's the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force General now, the commanding general for them. Yeah, they invested a lot in that, and it really paid off like big time. But he was one of those visionary kind of guys that I've always looked up to, and was like, wow, he really knew. You know, he saw a chance to do something, and it was very beneficial to the battalion, and definitely saved a lot of people's lives.
Oh, I can only imagine.
So shout out to Meatloaf. Shout out to Meatloaf on the podcast. So we deployed end of 2009. So we didn't know where we were going. We thought we were going to go to Iraq. And then I think in the summer of 2009, it kind of became like, okay, it's going to be Afghanistan again. And we went in at this point in time, Camp Leatherneck. The first time we were in Afghanistan, there wasn't a huge Marine contingent there. Like 24th MEU was there and 2-7 was in country. And they had a very hellacious deployment as like a special purpose MAGTF. They were operating like platoons where they would later have like companies and battalions. They were all over Helmand. They had a lot of casualties, a lot of intense fighting. If you ever look up 2-7 during that 2008 deployment, very hard. A lot of our air went to support them, I believe, after the initial clear in Garmser. But at this point, the Marine Corps was in business in Helmand Province. So we went to Leatherneck, which was like kind of an offshoot built, was co-located with Bastion, like a British base. I think it was Bastion. Yeah, that sounds about right. So we were out there. We were staged up. The battalion got in there, and this is where we kind of figured out. We sent some guys up to Kabul, and they flew back down with a bunch of Afghan army guys. I guess it was we were basically partnered man for man.
Wow.
Yes. Wow. So in retrospect, it was insane. These guys barely knew how to handle. I mean, at the point in time, they were not happy because they like lived with us in our tents, and that was not a popular decision. That was not a popular decision amongst the Marines. They didn't like it. I'm trying to think right now if I'm going to ask Zach Bell about this. I think they lived. Like we would have one Marine and one Afghan, like cot for cot.
Oh,
yeah. I don't think that was not a hit with the boys. You know, not into that. You know,
I can see why.
So that's kind of how that played out. And I can't remember. We did some kind of training together. We did some ranges and stuff. I remember Vallejo going out, and I think he had the Afghans shooting like their RPGs, which we didn't really know how to use either. And they're kind of like out there like squatting and like fire, you know. It's crazy now that I think about it, like risk wise. I think a lot of it though too is you have to remember, depending on how old you are, like at this point in time, we thought we could put Afghans in like tricolor army uniforms and give them M16s, and they would all of a sudden become like soldiers as we saw them. Yeah, so that was a very typical Marja patrol. Zach Bell's over there. You can see my dog handler. You can see Afghans and Marines mixed together. There's a French reporter coming out with us. This is totally, and like these Afghans, like their level of training, their level of commit, they don't do these kinds of things, right? They don't fight like this. This is not like the Afghan way. And this kind of is like, if you ever look at like Assad Khan speaks at length of this because he grew up in Pakistan. Like the Pakistanis have regional units, if that makes sense. So they have certain like the mountain corps, and they're like all tribed up and they all like work together. And like the ANA, we were like, we'll just pull these guys down from Kabul, totally different area. We'll pull them down to Helmand. They had no cultural, some of them didn't speak Pashto. There's no tribal, knowledge. It was just like for us, like we don't know enough to even comprehend like these
What's going on?
Yeah. But we just think we can just drive past it and just put him in a uniform and just send him out. Give him an M16. Look at him. He looks like a little soldier. So that was our solution. So we partnered man for man. I had this guy named Natula. He was like the squad leader. So we did. I want to make sure I get back to him during the insert story. But so we went down to southern Marja, and we did shaping operations. So the intent was we put Alpha Company down there, and we started running around and to try and bring the enemy down to the southern part of the city. It's not like really, we call it a city, but it's just like a whole built up area, but like still a lot of farms and that kind of thing. We call it a city though. That was really hard. So we had a really bad 3rd Battalion 10th Marines was there's a place called Fiddler's Green. It was a fire base. So the 310, our Marine artillery, was shooting out of there, and they would also run security ops around that area. And we went out to do a leaders recon, and I think it was basically it was like the platoon commanders, the squad leaders, and the platoon sergeants for 1st and 2nd platoon. And I think 3rd platoon at that time, I was in 2nd. They were back at one of the patrol bases. But the sergeant from 310, his name was Chris Herbeck, he was running the mission. So he knew what was going on. He showed us a brief. We did a map study. We had maps, but he was running the mission. Everything kind of went wrong on this. We had an IED strike. And then Sergeant Herbeck and I were he had a metal detector, and he stepped on an IED and was killed. And so there's this long process of trying to recover his remains. And we were going to need a wrecker to get one of our other vehicles that was struck out. Dave Emerson was injured in that vehicle. He was busted up in the face a little bit. Herbeck had stepped on the charge pretty close. So it was kind of like this was there. I had a lot of guys that hadn't seen a lot of like really bad things yet, and it was just, they were confronted with a Marine being blown, blown to pieces. But he stepped on a jug that I think it wasn't calibrated correctly. I think it was for a vehicle, because the amount of blast was catastrophic. So we had to recover Sergeant Herbeck, which we did. We went to great lengths to make sure we recovered absolutely every bit of his remains. We had a Huey come in and pick him up.
Wow.
So that was pretty difficult. And it was me and 3 EOD techs that I think they were from 310. They actually went out. I don't know if they were attached to 310 or not, but they helped me go out and sweep, to pick up. And that took a long time. So that didn't set like a great tone. And then the recovery efforts, there's a wrecker coming out to get the vehicle that was originally struck, and then they struck an IED. While this was happening, Zach Bell, who's probably one of my best friends in the world, one of my team, he was my my assistant patrol leader at that point in time. They were back with the platoon at like this patrol base, and they had these big thermal towers with like a camera on it called a G-Boss. They said they were watching the whole thing like on thermal basically play out. And Zach said he could tell like where I was standing, because he says I always stand a certain way, kind of like he always sleeps in the fetal position. I can tell you these things. We know each other that well. But he was just like, he was like, I was very concerned about that. And he was telling me about kind of what was happening with the ANA, like while they were gone. They had like a little ANA uprising they had to put down. It was very chaotic. So we had this going on. Charlie Company came to relieve us, and we went back to Leatherneck. Charlie Company took 2 KIAs, I think just from Angus and Smith, I believe, right as soon as they got inside a compound somewhere, circumstance. There was a lot of fighting down there during that initial shaping, and then we got back to Leatherneck, and then we prepared for we were actually going to helo assault into Marja, which I believe was the biggest Marine helo assault since Vietnam, and it was 1636. Elements of 1-3 were out there. I don't want to leave anybody out. LAR was out there. The British, everybody and their mom was in on this whole thing. So we helo assaulted in middle of the night on my 53, and the scope of control was a lot different. So anybody out there that's been like a squad leader, run some kind of like tactical element. So basically I went from having a squad to having 2 squads. So, but instead of 2 squads of Marines, I had a squad of A&A. So I think one of the benefits of being 25 years old, not 25, 26, I guess at the time, is I didn't know that was really stupid, maybe. Like, like how ridiculous the whole thing was, because I was just like, I'm a Marine and I'll handle it. We did. So we flew in, and I'm thinking about this, and I guess my 53 was basically just me and all of my guys getting off, maybe some attachments. But me and Zach and Mitch Schilling and I think it was Enyatula was the squad leader, and he's wearing a leather jacket. I don't know why, like a leather bomber jacket. And we were under a poncho, and we're looking at a map, and I'm like looking at my GPS, and Enyatula just pulls out a huge joint, and he's just like lights it and he's like smoking it, and me and Zach Bellis kind of look at him, and we're just like, dude. Yeah, he didn't speak any English, but it was his time. He decided it was like the Big Lebowski, mind if I smoke a J? So I remember there were some injuries on the insert too, just with the packs, the side, the gear, guys breaking their ankles. I think that's probably pretty normal. And then we started to clear. We had a lot of contact with the enemy. We used air, we used mortars, we did it all. Some ID strikes. We took, I believe it was a MEB. The MEB objective was like the school eventually where FOB Marja was built. This whole area, we just took it down periodically over the course of some days. I didn't consult any of my patrol logs, but we swept through the area, the Marja, most populated areas. I think a lot of civilians evacuated at that point in time, and the enemy just went to ground, which is what they do. Still asymmetric, so some guys stood in place and died, and some guys went to ground and waited for the civilians to come back in. And, just as Mao said, they're going to start swimming. The fish will start swimming with the locals.
Holy crap.
So from there, we broke down, and we started doing platoon level ops, platoon patrol bases. We went out, and that was probably the spring of 2010 was probably the hardest fighting I've ever done. As far as going out and spending a lot of time doing map study. First squad, Pat Main was wounded twice. He had 2 catastrophic IED strikes on the first squad. He was medevac the second time. He came back after his first time he was wounded. A lot of contact. I would say there was like a gunfight basically every day of that, and it was like toe to toe, squad to squad. I guess, and that's what they didn't have full squads out, but you'd run into some team-sized elements. Like 3 or 4 enemy is a lot when there's 12 of you and some Afghans, and they have prepared positions, and you're trying to navigate. And that also goes into kind of what I was talking about, where every time you're in contact, you don't know if you're being sent into because that's the most useful tactic they have. So we had some good luck with that. A lot of that too is I would plan with Zach and Mitch and the team leaders. We would plan some really hellacious routes, like some really shitty routes where there was no way we could strike an IED. So we would rather come into contact with the enemy in a gunfight than have an IED strike. So that was kind of the calculus we would use. We would try to mask our patrol routes behind compounds and then come out at certain points. We had a decent idea of what was populated and what was not. If there's villagers, if there's people out and about, you typically knew, so staying out of those like channelizing alleyways between compounds unless you see people there. We were pretty smart with that. We also had a lot of good luck.
Who are y'all fighting at right now? Are y'all fighting the Taliban, AQ, or?
Probably farmers. So I think that's probably, you can paint, I think it's a lot of it's painting that brush with, is it the Taliban? Is it the Haqqani network? Is it, who are these guys? Probably mostly locals, guys riding around on bikes, that kind of thing. I've never pretended to have like a great knowledge of,
who the heck they were.
The enemy order of battle, like they're a lot of farmers that didn't want us to be there. So we were running into that.
Wow.
running the patrols with the Afghans. At midpoint during this deployment, all of our Afghans, which we had some kind of relationship with, they left and were replaced by another Afghan unit. It was just a lot of really difficult patrols, difficult ops. Sometimes we do larger ops where 2 squads would go out together, usually with Dave Emerson, our platoon commander. We'd go out, we would set in somewhere and do some different patrols. One squad would stay back for security at like our patrol base. It's a lot of hard fighting. It was very taxing on the Marines. They did a fantastic job.
Is the terrain, are y'all in going from like villages to flat to mountains, or what?
Straight Helmand, everywhere I operated was straight farmland. There was a little bit of elevated terrain once in a while, but it's just flat down there for the most part.
Wide open.
Wide open. So yeah, we just went through that and did the best we could with that. The Marines were excellent. Especially the guys in the squad were really good. Our junior guys, that deployment, like Nick Filato, Adam Thomas, Roman Villalobos, TJ Chips, who was with me in Garmser. They're just great. They're just great guys. They're great Marines. They always did their job. They always went above and beyond. We did a lot of satellite patrolling. I was talking afterwards, 3rd Platoon, which was Brian Cage, Andy Rouser, Bill B. Andy Rouser was a big satellite patrol guy, so he would never have his squad essentially moving together. They always would be moving in a satellite, very decentralized. His teams would kind of move how they wanted to move on the route. So I think after I talked to Andy about that, actually, we started doing a lot more of that, which we satellited before, but a lot of that too, we would detach like a lot earlier. We'd take a machine gun team out with one of us, and we would just kind of bound through these. Everything was kind of like a sectored off. So there's a canal and there's trees around the canal, right? Then irrigated fields. So if we had to cross a field, we would kind of bound by team, usually with the machine gun team, with the team that's staying back as best we could. And we had a lot of success doing that because when I'm talking to Andy and Brian Cage, a lot of the time they would not get into contact just because it was so confusing for the enemy to figure out where the main body of the squad was. And we had a couple of chance contacts where we had a better ability to get on top of the enemy because they miscalculated. And the last thing they want is to be up close and personal with us because they never win. So when they would find themselves in that position, they got more cautious when they would take casualties where they were getting into chance contacts with us. So satellite patrolling made things like a lot more advantageous.
Wow. And you mentioned that y'all did have the Anglico and JTAC, in fact, supported Marines with y'all to call in air.
We were the J. So I was a JFO at the time, so I would do a lot of that, a lot of the LZ control type stuff for casualties.
Wow.
We had a lot of JTAC, so that was Meatloaf's whole thing, was just pushing that down. So the JTACs, like Anglico typically works with the Army or they don't usually work with Marines. They typically work with other services or other countries to give them, basically that capability. So that's kind of like, we kind of farm that out when Anglico is out there.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. Man. So how, and I got to imagine, like you said, getting a new group of guys, excuse me, has got to be, it's hard enough. You just got close with these guys. I got to imagine it's crazy getting a whole nother batch in, and now y'all are back into combat or in a new position, trying out satellite patrols, if you will. How long are y'all going about this, or does that second group stay with y'all until y'all finish up this deployment?
They did. So they stayed with us. We eventually broke down that platoon position and moved and were co-located with Alpha Company Maine. And we operated out of there. And then 2-6 came out to relieve us. So we did like a left seat, right seat with them. And they ended up having a very difficult deployment as well. I had a Lieutenant Zimmerman. He was one of the platoon commanders. He came out. He was KIA a short time later. He was actually my friend Dan Trackwell's platoon commander when he was over in 2-6. He actually cross-decked over to 2-6. So they had a very hard fight as well, because they started and continued doing squad and platoon level ops basically the whole time, and that's where you're going to see like the heaviest fighting when you're in these kind of like asymmetric, situations. About the Afghans, I think if I'd been smarter at the time, I'd been more concerned about it. I'd probably been more concerned about the Afghans in the first place if I'd thought more about it, but I was just so focused on the squad and the platoon and,
taking care of your guys.
I can't emphasize enough the level of cohesion that we had like in 2nd Platoon Alpha 1-6 at that time, with Dave Emerson as platoon commander, Stephen Vallejo as platoon sergeant, like Zach Bell. Like, I mean, that was a extremely strong platoon, extremely strong. They were some of the very best people I've ever seen. Yeah, I was lucky to be with that group of guys.
Sounds like y'all were very close, not only them being good Marines, but it sounds like y'all were all extremely close and knew exactly what the other was thinking and would be doing and such as that.
I can't begin to describe how close I am with like a lot of those guys. Zach took over first squad after Pat Main was wounded the second time. So he started running first squad. And that's when, we started getting ready for 2-6 to come out. 2-6 had 2 squad leaders that were KIA in one IED strike during that leaders recon portion, before the main group of 2-6 came out, which is obviously a big hit for 2-6. So like losing 2 squad leaders is very difficult for them. So it didn't really let up. Because we left in the summer of 2010. It didn't let up for 2-6. Yeah, when they got out there, they were right into it as soon as they got there.
Lord have mercy. Yeah, I mean, for your, and I'm blanking on what the Vietnam guys called it. Your checkout patrol for 2 squad leaders to go down in the same incident. That is not a good omen for the rest of the trip, so to speak.
So I think that there's something that a lot of people don't really understand, and it was never really thought about, was they knew during OIF, OEF that unit deployments were the only way to do things. 1st Marine Division in Vietnam was in Vietnam the whole time. Whatever, 1966 to 1971. And every Marine deployed individually. And I can't, that must have been very disruptive to the cohesion of the unit to have, like, knowing that, Bud is leaving in 2 months, where Ryan is going to be here for 6 months, and you're my squad leader, and you're like, we're on the same patrol, but we're on 2 different deployments. And I think that did a lot too. I think that was difficult for units all throughout GWAT. Is when somebody is killed or severely wounded, I think the scope of some things like World War II, Okinawa, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, where there's just, the beach is full, just dead Marines everywhere. Dead Marines left and right, whole companies wiped out, battalions combat ineffective. It's very traumatic during GWAT when somebody is killed or severely wounded that you have like such an intimate relationship with, that you've done a workup with them. And some people, you deploy multiple times with these same people. Some people, Stephen Vallejo, I deployed 3 times with him over a scope of years. So like my attachment to him is like really, really strong.
Your brother.
Right. He's like a brother of mine to this day. I was just texting with him actually this morning because I was telling him, hey, I'm going to be talking about you. And, but yeah, like, so those hits are really hard for people when you have such a close relationship with them, I think. Which I think probably was, if somebody took a different view of what it was like on Guadalcanal, which was like, one of the first major operations where guys trained together in the States and they went over on ship and, but then, there's a lot of guys, those battalions that did, the multiple island hopping campaigns during the Pacific. There was no original guys, or like, oh, so-and-so, there's a staff sergeant or a lieutenant. He used to be a lance corporal or a captain, They did multiple landings. It's like, none of my original friends are here. They're all gone.
Yeah, attrition just out of this world. Yeah.
Right, and I think people you don't fully understand some of the relationships that guys have with one another. So GWAT, like casualties are like a big deal. It's very traumatic for guys.
Yeah. Yeah, and and it would only get worse as time went on here. I mean, y'all were right there as the Iraq and all the Iran proxies coming in with the EFPs or whatever they're I forgot the
explosive force penetrator.
yeah that were
technology,
so
right.
deadly and all
Right.
of that, and it's just
In Afghanistan, we saw a lot of, I mean, it was directional fragmentation charges, which was kind of, the DFCs, which were like the pressure cooker in the wall, pull string, radio control. A lot of it was the yellow jug. There's a guy, he's a really, really funny, like, cartoon. He's an EOD tech. And he does like merch, and one is like a sticker of just a yellow jug. And I was like, that is hysterical. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. You say the yellow jugs, which had like cooking oil and stuff in, that's what they'd use for like their pressure plate IEDs.
Damn, ingenious. I mean, you got to give
very
them
low tech, right? Very low tech. Very, they had great. Their TTPs were very, very on point. They knew how to like leverage things. Yeah, very effective.
amazing. It seems like the public and some in the military, always looking down or not respecting the capability of our enemies. People went into Vietnam thinking, oh, it'll be, and I still see it today. Oh, they got beat by a bunch of rice farmers. It's like, well, the NVA had probably the most experienced and battle hardened army in the world at that point in time, and then the guys in Afghanistan, they have been fighting since the late 70s. In Iraq, put it like that, if someone invaded our home, you're going to have some pretty gnarly dudes step up and start filling the role. So I think
exactly. I think a lot of that though too, especially in Afghanistan, is they don't really care about fighting you, because they still got to farm and do their thing, and they got wives and kids. They just live there. They're just going to be there, and they'll even. And I think that's one of the hard things for people to comprehend is you can have a deal with a tribe, with a village elder, where they were your opponent at one point in time. They're not like the Taliban. They might be on your side for a while, but they're very pragmatic. They have their own concerns. They were looking out for their own area. They have their own, like, sometimes
little fiefdom.
Yeah, they're multi-generational squabbles with other
clans and
with other groups and it's very complex. And like I never had a good grasp of like the local terrain in that way, because we see everything from a very, you can get in a car right now and I could drive to your house. I could be at your house in like 2 days. Yeah. We could go have dinner. The world is that big to us, right? To them, it's much smaller. It's much more family oriented. It's much more, they're deeply concerned with where they're at, which is like the Western mind can't comprehend these kinds of.
Just like Vietnam and the indige in Vietnam, the yards and all the different sects and all of that.
Who didn't even like the South Vietnamese in the first place. They're ethnically a different group, but they were partnered with the CIA and with the Army Special Forces, and were a great ally. But they had no interest really in helping the South Vietnamese.
Not at all.
Not at all. But we co-opted them for our own means and gave them support to a point before not supporting them. Which we could say also of the Afghans.
Exact same ending.
Right, exact same ending. So you get a lot of that when you engage in these kinds of endeavors.
It is. It's and that's why it's so important that we have guys on here like you and the SOG vets to cover these. I mean, we can directly tie your work and having indigent soldiers around y'all's mission statement with what the guys, not necessarily what SOG was doing, to an extent what SOG was doing, but even what the Force Recon guys were doing when they'd have Kit Carsons with them, or the Marine grunts having Kit Carsons. I mean, it's hand in glove. It's so important to do what we're doing.
A lot of it's pretty humorous. When Worth Parker was on the show and he was talking about that ODA he was co-located with when he was out there with his force platoon, and they were doing like direct action because they didn't have any indigenous guys. And I know you've had a lot of Army SF guys in there. I am in no way, shape, or form an expert, or even a modicum of familiar with training indigenous forces. The process that they have to go through to get a useful product that even they would operate with, and the relationship that they would think is appropriate, to us flying some C-130s up to Kabul and bringing Afghans back and trying to integrate them directly in their Marine infantry battalion is pants on head stupid. Like it's a ridiculous idea, but I understand I can put myself in the perspective of the MEB leadership, because if you get told you're going to take out, this is an Afghan-led operation, because that's how we stamped this whole thing. Well, pow, if you ever look at any of the media releases, an Afghan-led operation, etc. They said that these are fully trained Afghans. You're going in with them. They're going to salute smartly and step off on the right foot and carry out their orders. But the reality of it is it's not that easy to integrate, and it goes back to like integrating, somebody could speak more to the ARVN of South Vietnam. We were much more, they weren't, it's not
capable, but
they were capable in certain units, but I don't think outside of Afghan SOF, some Afghan SOF was very good. You're not going to see, if we can't just stuff you in a set of tricolors and we'll call you a soldier, but that's the only way that we could do that. We couldn't come up with some way of having regional Afghan units where it was tribal and, homogenous in a way that they would allow them to be effective, like the way the Pakistanis do it.
No, it's civil war.
We can't think about things in that way, which is probably a reason we shouldn't engage in these kinds of things, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
So with that deployment winding down with 1-6, what are y'all going back to the East Coast now? Or
Yep.
East Coast.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Are y'all going back to the East Coast to get ready for something else, a new training cycle?
Yes, we did. So we returned. I decided to stay with the battalion. I got promoted, and as a staff sergeant, I took over 3rd platoon. So I moved from 2nd platoon and took over 3rd platoon. I think that my entire Marine Corps experience was kind of like some kind of Disneyland 03, a lot of it was just opportunity that was offered to me. Most people don't get to pick up staff sergeant and get to take over their own line platoon. It's usually they have to go do something else, or they take over one of the weapons sections, which are supposed to be led by staff sergeants, machine guns or mortars. They just let me take over 3rd platoon. I didn't have to. A lot of guys, when they check in as staff NCOs, staff sergeants particularly, they have to kind of earn their place and show they're tough and show that they know what they're doing and do the whole thing and make sure that nobody's going to rebel against them, because it is when you talk about Marine Corps discipline, leading infantry Marines is, they're super smart. They're really aggressive. They're going to, they're very tough. They're very tough. They're not very nice. They're rambunctious to say the least. So I just got to walk over next door and I'm just a known quantity. It was just, it was Ryan from 2nd platoon. He's taking over 3rd platoon. Everybody's happy because
your bona fides were well known.
They all know exactly who I am. I didn't have to do a damn thing. So that was probably one of the most fortunate things that could have happened. So we did some turnover. Richard Ayala, he was the company gunny for Charlie, and he got promoted to 1st sergeant, and he took over Alpha Company. And he took a really big interest in me. Shout out to Rich Ayala. Quintessential Marine Corps infantry guy, drill instructor, multiple combat deployments. As platoon sergeant, he was a platoon commander, went to the drill field, came to 1-6. He's basically epitomizes everything that is the Marine Corps in one really large, scary Puerto Rican guy. And he was just awesome. And he took it really, he took care of me. He took great care of me. Taught me a lot as a new staff NCO. We got a new drop of officers who Tyler Folan, who's lieutenant colonel now, he was my platoon commander. He's like a brother to me. So we were paired up. Some of the other guys, Jimmy Richmond took over 2nd platoon. Ed Yu took over 1st. Matt Ives So we had a kind of an odd rotation for officers. We did not have a first lieutenant XO. So Matt Ives, as the second lieutenant, took over as XO. Him and John Graham was the company gunny, another super tough 0369 infantry dude. He did the Martian deployment with us. Matt Lang showed up as the staff sergeant, another awesome infantry guy. Nick Archut, another staff sergeant. He was with Eddie over at 1st Platoon. Mike Hornacek, longtime 1-6 guy. He was the platoon sergeant for Jimmy Richmond at 2nd Platoon. Really strong company staff for the staff NCOs and officers, and very cohesive. Just fantastic time with these guys. They were awesome. I got a couple new sergeants over in 3rd, Carlos Perez and James Davis. They both came from SOI sergeants, very solid. Carlos retired as a 1st sergeant. James is a sergeant major now.
Wow.
Colin Henson came from security forces as a corporal. He was like my age, so he joined a little bit later, and he took over one of the squads. Very big dude. He's like one of those guys. There's guys in the Marine Corps that obviously have had jobs with like customer service, and he'd be like, "What do you need? What can I do for you? Like, here, let me help with that." And you're just like, "Oh, this guy, he just knew how to like deal with people, you know." So it's just like, "Oh man, Colin Henson is so great." So we had like a really awesome 3rd Platoon. With a lot of like really great team leaders. Keegan Weckman, he was a team leader and a squad leader for parts of the workup. Really great guys. 2nd Platoon continued to do, like a lot of my junior guys took billets and took teams and squads over there. Nick Filato, Adam Thomas. And we started doing a workup. I don't know if we didn't know what we were doing, I don't think, at that point in time. We started a workup, doing the thing. And eventually we knew we were going to go into Sangin Valley, Upper Sangin Valley. And we knew 1-5 was there. They'd relieved 3-5. 3-5 had a really difficult deployment there in 2010. 1-5 had an equally difficult deployment. So one day, me and Tyler got called into the company commander, Dave Fleming. He's a colonel in the Marine Corps now, that guy. We got called into his office, and Rich Ayala was in there, and he and I think Dave Fleming said, "You know, you guys are my best platoon." And Tyler was like, "Thank you, sir." And I was like, "We're gonna get fucked." And don't look too happy, Tyler. And he's like, "Hey, we're standing up a 4th line company, and you guys are gonna go be part of it." So we went. And we set up this, and this is after we did CAX, which is like our big combined arms company live fire. We went over there. Curtis Shreve was the company commander. I talked to him pretty regularly. He's a retired lieutenant colonel. You know, and we were talking the other day. He advocated because he knew that they were going to do this 4th line company, where we're going to have a weapons company, where we're going to have 4 line companies. So he advocated for, hey, can we stand it up before Mojave Viper, CAX? So we can go train together. And that, for whatever reason, they decided not to do that. So we were thrown together. I think there was a headquarters platoon. Then there was 3 line platoons. The other 2 platoons are mostly made of weapons, MOS guys. So they got together and they organized into their squads. But they were all machine guns, mortars, assaultmen. And we stood up the company. We had, I'm trying to think of Kelly Candies. He's still he's a lieutenant colonel. He was one of the platoon commanders. Nate Peterson was an RD, forward observer officer. We had Sam Burgos as the company gunny, Marcus Tucker as the 1st sergeant. I didn't know Marcus or Sam that well at that point in time, but I got to know them better. We were very sure. We had like 4 staff NCOs in the company, 4 senior enlisted guys, and I was one of them. That's pretty light. Josh Blevins was the other staff sergeant in the company. He was a platoon commander for part of that deployment. And Alpha Company like reorganized as well. Like Nick Archuk was a platoon commander. One of my guys, Wendell Sanders, was his platoon sergeant. So they mixed everybody around to kind of fill those gaps. So we deployed light as far as like kind of how we were organized. So, and then we went into Sangin Valley. We got to Leatherneck. We went out and supported 1-5. We went up there to a patrol base called Fahim. 1-5 was there. They were pretty beat up. Sangin Valley is a highly vegetated area. It's farmland. It's right on the Helmand River. And out there, you wear green green camouflage uniforms. So we switched over to greens. First time in combat I'd ever worn, green camis, the frog suits, the combat shirt and pants. So we went out, and I think the first day we got there, a sniper team went out, and they were set up, and they were there overnight. I'm not sure exactly what the mission was, but they broke down the next morning, and 2 of the snipers were killed like that by an enemy sniper when they broke down the position. So, we knew that it was a serious area. It was extremely serious. So we started operating out of there, and eventually we went and set up a patrol base close to the Helmand River, which 3rd Recon Battalion was operating as a battalion at that point in time, and they were at patrol base Alcatraz north of us. 611 was the MSR that ran north to south through that area, and Kajaki Dam had they could generate power there, so they wanted to keep the MSR open. So that was part of the whole scheme, was to keep the route open, obviously, which it was not. There's a Marine artillery battalion up there in Kajaki, so it was basically to try and take control of the upper Sangin valleys to make a play for it. We operated out of there. We set up a patrol base. 3rd Recon came and looked at it. They didn't want it, so we broke everything down and we retrograded. Eventually, we called it Weapons Company. I don't know why we didn't call it Delta Company. We should call it Delta Company. I'm gonna text Curtis Shreve and be like, I'm telling the world that we should call it Delta Company. We should have pushed harder for that. So Weapons Company, that was not a weapons company. We went to Alcatraz. We reorganized as a battalion because we had Alpha was down in Marja. We weren't all operating together as a battalion. Our companies were pieced out, and we were operational control like other people and doing all kinds of other stuff. So we got the whole battalion together, and we did a helo assault, which was, I don't know, a minute and a half flight. Basically, we lifted from Alcatraz and we landed north to south, south to north in succession in the valley, and we just took patrol bases near the route to try and basically deny the enemy access to it. So then we just started basically slugging it out with the enemy in the Sangin Valley. Alpha Company was in a lot of contact down there. At one point, we had a platoon cross the Helmand River and set up a patrol base on the other side of the river. They were in significant contact. Weapons Company platoon. So more hard fighting out there. We bypassed a lot of the nastier stuff. Seemed to kind of flow around us. We had our share of contact with the enemy, but it wasn't. I was very thankful we didn't have anything particularly catastrophic in third platoon weapons. So we just kind of continued operating out there and doing the best we could.
You mentioned the farmland and it being grassy in the area. Was this in Sangin?
That was in Marja. That was when I was escorting. That was that New York Times reporter that got some good glamour shots.
Oh yeah, he dang sure did.
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, he was laying really low during that. That was.
Was this a full-on a contact? I've got another one.
Yeah, that was a full-on. It was the same firefight. I think we're in firing movement, trying to advance on the enemy. I guess it was right after Zach Bell took a really good law shot at an enemy position. He knows what I'm talking about. Yeah. So yeah, we were advancing. There's some pretty good photos from that point in time.
That's some fantastic. I had one I'm hoping might be the bigwigs, or maybe
that was third platoon when we were still in Alpha Company. That's Tyler Folan just to my left. Keegan Weckman. I guess from right to left, that would be James Davis, Keegan Weckman. There's Tyler Folan, me, Colin Hinson, Jay Amra, and Carlos Perez. Jay was our machine gun squad leader, another absolutely awesome guy. Tyler, actually, Jay and I were at the Marine Corps Museum when Tyler picked up Lieutenant Colonel, so that was really cool.
Wow, what a bunch of studs.
They were really, really good guys.
Yeah, looks like a bunch of studs there. That's it's crazy hearing all the names you're going through ending up with sergeant majors and lieutenant colonels and all of that. I mean,
there's Sean Miller and I and Garmser. I was texting with him the other day. He was my platoon commander. Another super awesome guy, great Marine officer.
Is that what you guys would normally a normal loadout for a patrol, or would it be based on how hot the area?
That's a pretty normal loadout, and like I still to this day remember. It's really, I would probably carry 7 to 8 mags of 5.56 with one in the weapon. I would carry 2 grenades. I would carry a high concentration smoke for obscuring movement. I would carry a colored smoke for marking, and usually 2 pop-ups for signal, usually on my back. So I'd have somebody pull it off my back if I needed to. GPS. I carried kind of like a kangaroo pouch, which would have my map and my notebooks and all my cheat cards for like 9-line medevac, call for fire, anything I needed as far as like comm stuff or sending up reports. Usually I'd have an IR buzz saw, which is like 2 infrared chem lights, so each could break, and they're connected by a 550 cord. You could spin it rapidly, and it looks like a infrared buzz saw for on like signaling aircraft.
That is awesome.
I have to do that. I think I may have only done that once in all those years, but that was like a pretty normal technique back then. A variety of IR chem lights, usually for marking or that kind of thing.
Man, oh man. And was that Afghanistan?
This was at Mojave Viper PAX. So that is my good friend Brian Cage off to the right, Nick Archett next to him, Mikey Hornacek, and there's Richard Ayala, and then me, and that's Matt Graff, and then there's Antoine Miller.
Wow. I've heard of, is it Hornacek or?
Hornacek? Yeah, that's Mike Hornacek. Yeah.
I swear I've heard that name. I've heard his name mentioned by someone before, and
he has like a little bit of a social media presence. He does like music concerts and stuff like that. He retired as a gunnery sergeant.
Okay, I swear I've heard that name somewhere. I've got to figure it out now. It's going to drive me insane. So wow. Okay. Working. It sounds like it just progressively got hotter, harder, and a lot more stuff, which it normally would with a war that's going on into its decade-long fight, which there'd be another one afterwards. How long are you guys there for? And does the mission change at all? Is there anything y'all are doing out of the ordinary? Are y'all continuing on patrols, ambushes, and the like, just continuing like normal?
Pretty much trying to keep control of Route 611. A lot of it's we're just engaging the enemy when we can, when we run into them. It was pretty consistent throughout that. So this is another 6-7 month deployment. So we returned, I think, in like February of 2012. That's when we kind of came back.
With there being the major route running through, and I don't know why I didn't ask this earlier on your previous 2 that we mentioned, were y'all ever seeing, maybe not working with, shall we say, but were y'all ever coming across any ODAs or SEAL teams out and about?
Yeah, so we were co-located. So VSO, Village Stability Operations, VSP. There's a lot of dog activity.
He's having fun.
He's having a good time. We're dog sitting. So I'm probably gonna let these guys out.
It's all right. Gotta love a man that loves a dog. We are big dog people here, so no worries.
So I think yes. So the VSO BSP, it was an Army ODA, was operating. They were neighbors to us, and then so they I think Worth Parker talked about the JSODF relationship. It was kind of different because there was different times where it wasn't me. I can't remember how we tried to do this, but we tried to coordinate something with them. And they had good resources, and their Afghans were very good. Like they were well trained by the ODAs, but they couldn't just do whatever they wanted. they had to.
Casting.
I don't want to speak out of turn here. I don't know if this is even accurate, but I was under the impression they had to get like their hire had to approve their missions to a degree, whereas we just did our own missions. It was our area, so they kind of had some different requirements in place before they did certain things. And I'm not sure if it was just secure. I don't know if it's necessarily security patrols, but I think we tried to get them to do some things with us. And they were like, we want to, but we need to get some approval. I remember they did give us some resources because they had like a gym. They had like protein shake. They had like more accoutrements than we did.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But, yeah, that sounds right, because you always hear of deconflicting and all of that, and I've heard of guys that were in the GWAT and talking about missions being scrubbed for seemingly no reason because the captain or the major or whatever was like, no go, not doing it. So that sounds about like what an ODA would have to go through, probably.
Right. Yeah, because I'm not even actually sure how that relationship worked as far as like the VSO, even though we were in the same AO, or if they were located, they were bordering on like the AOs, like how that command structure worked as far as what they needed authorization to do. We were pretty loose. Like I could send like an Lance Corporal patrol leader out to kind of they go out and do all kinds of stuff. But like I said, I understand that they have different requirements and there's different considerations with how they do things.
Gotta love the Marine Corps, boy. So y'all, you guys finish up, and this time again, are you heading straight back to the East Coast again?
Yeah, I went right back to Lejeune. I spent some time training. I went over to the advisor training cell, so I was training like the advisor teams that were going to go over and work with the Afghans. So I taught like their weapons and tactics, like a little package. They would have these advisor teams go over. They were all led by colonels and lieutenant colonels, and they would go over and partner at higher levels with the Afghans. So train them up, give them some shooting packages. I was given a lot of leeway as far as developing. Brian Cage came over with me. Mike Kontic from Charlie Company, who's a squad leader, like 4 deployments, very experienced. He came over, and we started running different shooting packages. We got some guys over to do vehicle operations. It was before it was a contractor led. So then they were trying to bring Marines back into the program. So then we started doing that kind of thing. So I spent some time there, got some orders out to I went back to California, to Bridgeport, the Mountain Warfare Training Center. At that point, did a little bit of training, did some skiing. Didn't do a whole lot. I was kind of like, I took the voluntary separation program. They were offering force shaping, so they were going to shrink the Marine Corps. So like 0369 staff sergeants and gunnies were given like basically a payout if you'd get out. So worked in a 3 shop there for a little bit with my good friend Brian Guinea, who retired as a major. He actually lives up in Portland now. He's one of my buddies I get to hang out with still pretty consistently.
Wow.
Decided to leave in 2014 and packed up and hit the road.
Wow. And what S3? I always mix that up. Is that Intel or
it's ops operations?
Operations.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm still not good with S1 through 4, but I'm getting.
You're getting there. You'll get there. Yeah.
Wow. So the S3 shop was your last full duty job before retiring?
Yep. Yeah. So I didn't retire. I just took like a separation. It was just like you can leave now. Yeah.
Did you ascertain another rank before you got out, or did you separate as a staff sergeant?
I separated as staff sergeant.
Staff sergeant. Okay. Wow. And did you are you still working with the Corps in any way? Are you doing anything with the Marine foundations or anything? Or are you now a complete civilian now, as we say?
I'm a complete civilian. Went to school for some time. I was worked in law enforcement for a good bit, both city and at the federal stuff. Did contracting. I worked for Triple Canopy. Did the overseas contracting. I had a little stint doing that. And then, you know, I transitioned. I'm working in the private sector, basically in financial coaching, financial wellness, primarily for first responders, but also for veterans, military folks, basically anybody. That's kind of the model I'm working with my group.
That's awesome. Helping, continuing to help veterans. That's awesome. And Lord knows they need it with all the issues that's going on with VA healthcare and payments coming out, and the way the way the economy is about to go into the shiter. That's a noble cause. I'm glad to hear that you're still helping people. That's amazing to hear. Man, so. No, we won't get in it, but how long did you stay? How long was your law enforcement and then your triple canopy stint? Was it a few years, or did you?
Yeah, so it was kind of split. So I worked after my undergrad. I worked.
Oh, where'd you go to college, by the way? Sorry about that.
So I did undergrad at George Fox University here in Oregon, and I got an MBA from Eastern University, which is like right outside.
Wow.
Yeah, right outside Philadelphia.
Congratulations on that. Jeez Louise, MBA. So you completed that, went into law enforcement federally and state or local, and then triple canopy and overseas for a bit. Were you in the Middle East, or can you not talk about?
Yeah, I was in the Middle East and I was in Afghanistan. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was during it was the pretty normal mobile security type stuff that it's not to be confused with some of the early GWAT.
Oh yeah, totally different.
Pretty regulated, very, we do things a certain way based on like our clients' training requirements.
You're not riding around in a white Suburban bumping cars out of the way with the saw out the window.
No, we didn't. Yeah, it was a lot more. It was much more regimented than those earlier days. Yeah.
Wow, man, that is just an outstanding history and resume. I mean, geez Louise, you covered a lot of facets there, both in the infantry realm, but covering a lot of different jobs, shall we say, but skills. Just amazing stuff going on, outstanding stuff. And some of the things we didn't cover that are in the other podcast are pretty funny, about some of your helicopter training and stuff like that. That was pretty funny, but outstanding. Is there anything you'd like to close up with or say before we get ready to shut down?
No, I really appreciate you having me on the show. I really loved Craig Kaczynski's episode and Worth Parker. I listened to those. I listen to the show pretty often. I think we were kind of talking about this. I just really appreciate what you're doing as far as bringing a lot of really high quality interviews out regularly that I can listen to when I'm out walking, or driving somewhere, because I get I don't do a lot of notifications on YouTube, but I have yours on notification because
that's a heck of an honor. I appreciate that.
Yeah, but yeah, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the content you put out and like your historical commitment to especially the Vietnam guys, which I think is really, really cool. And not enough of that is on paper. And I think your efforts might get more people to record more stuff so we can all learn from the people that came before us and showed like a really great commitment.
Thank you. It's always great I love when everybody appreciates it, the civilians, but when veterans appreciate it and much less watch it, it means the absolute world. And I can't thank you enough for putting up with my hectic schedule and allow us a little flexibility, because I've been wanting to speak to you since I first started to get with Worth and Mr. Craig and all the guys. And I'm hoping I can continue on. And if you've got any gentlemen that would want to or care to come on and talk to us, we'd love to have some more Marine veterans on.
I have plenty of guests for you if you're whatever. We have plenty of people you can talk to with a lot of really interesting and probably more hilarious stories too. But
well, that is a absolute awesome. And as usual, though, if you ever come on or if you've got a guest that would like to have you on with them, you've always got an open platform to come back on and talk to us, share, or just bullshit with us.
Yeah, thanks, bud. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And everybody, thank you all for watching. And if you've got questions, get them to me. I'll link Brian's Instagram and Facebook to the show notes. And if you reach out to him, don't be weird, for the love of God. If you do, I'll take it off of there. But you can reach out. If not, send me questions and I'll get them to Ryan and get them answered for you. So thank you again, Ryan. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day.